in a recent collaboration where we are studying the cases of reincarnation, and we studied some subjects who could recall their past lives, or we also studied the subject who, even though blindfolded, they may recognize the objects outside. So we verified that that's a true case. We studied that very extensively. We studied a very interesting case. So that is connecting the sense of doership, my sense of false ego, to the perception of time. So in the cognitive neuroscience, so the sense of agency is a very important concept. It has been shown that the sense of agency is very much linked with sense of the experience of the time. So what we wanted to see is how meditation transforms one's notion of self and notion of agency, and how it is connected with the perception of time. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and share my works with all of you. I am Jyotiranjan from Institute for Science and Spirituality. So today I am going to speak on the nature of perception and reality. First of all, start from certain frameworks from Indian knowledge system and support it through my own research that I have done in recent time. So some of them are already published. Yeah, that would be the primary agenda today. So I'll be speaking on perception and reality, and how we can create a science that is inspired after Indian philosophy, or truly embodies Indian philosophy. So that would be today's agenda of my talk. So if we reflect back, so what is science and how science emerged? So we come to know that science came out as a successor to natural philosophy. So natural philosophy was the branch of Western philosophy where people studied the nature and natural phenomenon. So that was the precursor to science. So science emerged as a systematic logical framework to study, explain the happenings in nature. As we know today, science it governs all aspects of our life, whether it is our education system, it's our social life, public life, anything you take, everywhere science and technology triumphs. The reason science emerged as such a powerful tool because its ability to control the nature, to predict things, to logically explain things in an objective way. So that objectivity is considered the primary feature of science, where one can predict things, one can describe the event without any subjective aspects added to it. So that's how science has emerged such a successful tool for humanity. At the root of, at the origin of science, it's actually a revolt against the way it appeared. It appeared as a revolt against church. If you look at Western origin, how it evolved, so it evolved as a revolt against church, religion. So naturally, science is, by construction, it is agnostic about the tools it presents. It's agnostic about religious aspects or spirituality, or any realm which is having some aspects of subjectivity. That was never a story in this part of the land, in Indian philosophy, Indian science. So in the West, science and religion, or science and spirituality, oftentimes it is described in three different theses. So first is the conflict thesis. Conflict thesis means science is necessarily against religion. Science is at conflict with, at war with religion or spirituality. Second one is independence. Let science occupy its independent domain and let religion talk about its own independent world. But the third one is cooperation, that science nourishes religion or spirituality and spirituality nourishes science. So that was the context for Western way of understanding science and spirituality, or science and religion. But in the context of Indian tradition, so science and spirituality were never seen as two different things, because they come out of the same framework, same system. So they are not really two independent steps, or they are never at conflict, because the same ontological frameworks that give rise to religion or spirituality So that very same ontological framework also gave rise to Indian version of science. So you may say that science is science, why to make it Indian or Western? So the reason I'm deliberately making a distinction is because the way they operate. So if you define science as a systematic logical inquiry, then no issues. But when you restrict the domain of science to only physical stuff of this material realm, which can be measured in a third person way, objectively, without requirement of any first person experience or subjectivity, what we know. So if you say that, then we are limiting the scope of science. So that is how it has been. Of course, there are now many voices where in the Western context, people are trying to understand consciousness, the subjective awareness, the role of observer in different studies, so different disciplines of science. But in the Indian context, it was totally different in the sense we always had experience-centric science or experience-centric formulation of philosophy. So what it is, so it means essentially that it actually says that the world that we perceive around us, so and the perceiver, so and the perceived object, they're not really independent. So I cannot study the world independent of the observer or the perceiver. So in our philosophical understanding, so we have created several strata of conscious experience. So it starts with sensory level, then at the level of mind, and then at the level of intellect, then at the level of identity, my false identity, which we call ego or ahankara. At that level, so and finally at the level of Atman, or the pure consciousness. So the experience is something so fundamental to Indian version of science. That's why I purposefully say that it is different from the Western approach to understand the nature. So that's the context we are talking at. So currently, if you look at the Western philosophy or the Western science that emerged out of it, so because of this incomplete understanding of the reality and how perception shapes the reality and how perceiver, the observer, what's its role. So because of lack of, I would say, proper understanding of that, or to the extent Indian philosophical systems, 6 Indian philosophical systems, Nyaya, Vaisheshika system, Sankhya, Yoga system, and Mimamsa, Vedanta system. So the way they understand reality and perception, I would say the Western approach is, I would say it's incomplete. So that's why in the Western context, people had invented certain problems which never existed in Indian context. For example, the mind-body problem. So it goes back to the famous philosopher René Descartes. René Descartes, so he was trying to discern what is reality, what is true, what is the truth. So he come to the conclusion that he came to the conclusion that I think, therefore I am. Because I exist, therefore, with all certainty, I can say that I am real. I am truth. Other than me, anything else that exists, I'm not very sure whether they exist or not. So that's the way of discernment René Descartes made. And then he conceived 2 constructions: mind, mental realm, and physical realm. Now the problem became how the mental realm and the physical realm they interact. So that gave rise to the famous or infamous mind-body problem. So mind and body matter are 2 independent realms, but how do they interact? If you look at our own existence, so we have our mental realm and we have our physical realm, the body. So we exist as a complete whole, not that mind is something different and body is something different. Whenever we have some changes in mind or somebody is depressed, so the effect is seen on the bodily level, the hormone level, you can see the changes. At the brain level, you can see through neurophysiology, so that is there. So now how mental realm or the realm of consciousness interact with the physical realm. So that's always been a mystery, and people have tried to address this in different ways, panpsychism and so many isms people have invented. And but in the Indian context, the story is very different. So Indian context, there was never a time when in these 6 systems of Indian philosophy, particularly I'm referring to, so there is no such mind-body problem, because mind and body, they are seen, they are considered as part of a complete framework. As I mentioned in the beginning, so the experience takes place at different strata. So at the sensory level, at the level of mind, at the level of intellect, at the level of false identity or ego, at the level of, then finally the Atman, or the root of pure consciousness, that is the final perceiver, the one that experiences. Everything else, they're part of Prakriti or material nature. So it's very interesting that in our philosophy, Indian philosophy, if you even refer to Bhagavad Gita, so there we find that the discussion about who is the doer. So that question comes. So who is the doer? So naturally we'll see that we are the doer. So Bhagavad Gita answers that it's actually not the pure Atman that is the doer, it's actually the Prakriti. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvas, as Bhagavad Gita says. And similarly, if you refer to Sankhya system also, the Sankhya system presents the dualistic framework where Prakriti and Purusa are considered separate. So it's actually the Prakriti that acts. It's the Purusa or the seat of consciousness that is just the perceiver. It doesn't act. So it's only the material nature that works. So now in this context, how we can create a framework in the modern scientific era. So that's the research that we have been doing. So I thank my several collaborators in the last couple of years who worked with me and helped me to shape this problem statement, work on it. So it has different sets. So the goal is to create an ontological and epistemic framework so that we can bring out the science of experience and perception in Indian philosophy to modern context. In the modern science, if you look at, so it's primarily a reductionist framework. What is a reductionist framework? Reductionist framework means I have a complex problem, and I can go on dividing the problem into smaller and smaller subunits. And if I can explain the smallest possible subunit, then it's a hypothesis that I can create the effects that is seen at the highest level. So that's the idea for reductionism. So although we may explain away everything through our reductionist approach, just like the consciousness studies talks about, particularly David Chalmers' hard problem of consciousness, how subjective awareness arises within us. So that's a question I often laugh at the way Western science emerged. Right at the onset of, right at the beginning, we wanted to create a framework which is completely objective, third person centric, and there is no role of subjectivity and no subjective awareness or experience. Now we are going back and asking, where is subjective awareness? Where is experience? How can that arise? So there is a famous cartoon, it's oftentimes, if you Google subjective awareness or hard problem of consciousness, student is explaining how consciousness arises. So explains at different layers, goes to the level of DNA, RNA, mitochondria, the cellular, subcellular level, nuclear level, and then all of a sudden, bang, and something happened and we become conscious. So that's how empirical modern science has attempted to explain away the issue of subjective awareness, the consciousness and related issues by this reductionist framework that it adheres to. But if you look at the Indian way, Indian scholars, the philosophers, particularly Nyaya Vaisesika system, if you look at, the way it formulates the fundamental realities of the nature. So the Vaisheshika system, it originally gave the 6 ontological items: Padartha, Drabya, Guna, Samavaya, Samanya, and like that. 6 categories it mentioned on the ontological categories. And further, it was elaborated with the idea of abhava, or in absence. So that's another ontological category that was added to Nyaya Vaisheshika system. And everywhere you see the role of experience is so fundamental. How cognition happens. What is the fundamental way of gaining knowledge, the pramana system, that is never independent of the role of cognition or experience. So anywhere we construct any ontology, it is grounded upon the epistemic framework, the underlying epistemic framework. So here, whether it is Nyaya Vaisheshika system or even in Sankhya system, which considers the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, as the primary universals that kind of permeates everything, and because of which things happen, and that is how the Prakriti is composed of. So in that there are 25 elements, 25 ontological categories. So and all these different frameworks, they have their own epistemic and ontological ideas, categories to describe the nature of reality and perception and experience. In all of them, unlike Western approach or the modern science, the reductionist approach, so in all of these frameworks, so the role of subjectivity or conscious awareness, experience, cognition, all these are very much intrinsic to the structure. So that's why there was never a time when there was the issue of mind-body problem, for example, that surfaced in Indian philosophy, unlike Western philosophy and the Western science. So of course the science, at least the hard sciences like physics, it prefers to remain agnostic of any realm outside very objective third-person descriptions. Even for that matter, mind is also not considered fundamental in a strict physics theory. So, but however, psychology people, they study that, and with the emerging trends in AI consciousness studies, so people are more and more embracing the idea that consciousness could be fundamental. Now I would like to describe some of our recent works where we attempted to create a narrative so that instead of considering mind, consciousness, your sense of identity, rational faculty as emergent effects or emergent phenomenon or high level effects that comes out of interaction among elementary particles. So we want to create a framework where we start from a more high level framework and then come down to the level of matter. So overall the framework is to show that matter is actually a derivative of higher level of ontological realities. So in that essential idea is interaction. So in the mind-body problem, the essential component is how do they interact. So here I would like to give one example. Oftentimes I mention this. So suppose two of us are interacting. I am speaking in English and you are understanding in English. So there is a samanya here. What is the samanya? First of all, that I am a human being, so also you are. And I am speaking English and you understand English. So there is a commonality between us, that a human being who knows English. So that makes a common ground for our interaction. So unless and until there is a common ground between us, between two things, they would never interact. I mean, that's also the same principle even in modern physics. Two objects, two subatomic particles will only interact if they're charged under same quantum number. Say for example, subatomic world, I have a quark and a lepton. If they are not charged under the same gauge group, so they will not speak to each other. So one common one is electromagnetic interaction because they are charged under electromagnetic charge. So that is how the interaction happens. So it requires a common platform, commonality or samanya, so that the interaction can happen. Even in Nyaya Vaisheshika system, even the logical framework, the 5-step logical framework to deduce anything to deductive logic, it presents. So from starting from pratigna or the statement to the conclusion, so the flow is carrying to the next layer of argument because of samanya. So whenever and wherever there is some interaction, some deduction, some flow, so there has to be something in common. Without that, it cannot happen. So that's a secret. Our philosophical frameworks were extremely clear about. So, and that's how the whole Nyaya Vaisheshika system was laid down, and also the Sankhya Yoga system, and also Vedanta Mimamsa system. So here, if I want to create a framework in which I start from a realm, say mental realm or realm of intellect, and then come down to the layer of matter. So then matter is essentially, matter comes out as a derivative of conscious experience or perception. Of course, there are several versions of Vedanta where, say, in the Advaita, the world is not considered real as such, it is considered illusion. But in other Vedanta interpretations, the Vaishnava Vedanta categories, so for example, I follow the Achintya Veda. So, and, of course, all Vedanta paradigms, they have their own glories in their own terms. So fundamentally, every such paradigm accepts consciousness as the fundamental, consciousness or the Atman as the fundamental unit of awareness. So in such a framework, how does matter arises? How the physicality emerges? So that's a question that has haunted me for several years by now. I've been trying to understand how matter can come out as a derivative of operations at the realm of consciousness or mind. So to do that, recently we worked on a problem. It's about flocking of birds. So I'll describe 2-3 works that got recently published or about to. So there we started, or at least we attempted to connect mental realm or the realm of subjectivity to a realm of objectivity. So by the way, the notion of objectivity is actually a construction. If time permits, I'll describe that as well. So let us start with this problem statement that I have certain birds flocking together. As we have seen in the clear sky, we see the birds, although they may start from random positions, flock together, they form very beautiful patterns you might have seen. How does that coordination happens? So the birds are very dumb creatures and they have very little rational cognitive faculties unlike us. So how do they coordinate? How does that happen? So we wanted to describe this. It has many other practical applications to multi-agent coordination problems and distributed intelligent systems. So like that. So how does that happen? So what we did that traditionally this problem has been studied using nonlinear dynamics, the classical frameworks. Classical framework means there one studies the momentum of the birds and every bird follows the neighbor's average momentum, and then the collective behavior appears. This is the famous Vicsek model. It goes back to some 3 decades or 4 decades maybe. So what we wanted to do is to create a framework where instead of studying the physical momentum as such or only that, so let us cast this problem to a problem of coordination, mental coordination or judgment making process within the cognitive faculty of the birds, decision making process. So let's cast that as a decision making process. Say a bird is there and it has two neighbors to follow. Suppose it decides two neighbors to follow. So now let us count the elementary percepts that the decision making process may have. So when I say elementary percepts, so I say that's the unit percept that can take place at one time. So interestingly, the Nyaya Vaisheshika system, which considers mind as atomic. So it says that the Nyaya Sutras speak about that. The cognition, it can happen one at a time, one percept at a time. So that means there cannot be two percepts at the same time, or multiple percept cannot be at the same time. But yet the bird is in a sense aware of all such combinations of percepts that may potentially take place. One of those may pop up at one point because of the process of decision making. If I want to describe that, all these discrete possibilities being possible at the same time. So a natural framework that comes to mind is, certainly it is not Boolean logic. So certainly one is prompted, one is tempted to consider the framework of quantum mechanics, quantum formalism, which considers the idea of superposition. Superposition means two definite outcomes or multiple definite outcomes can coexist. So now I describe the decision making state of each bird as superposition of all these elementary percepts. So what does that mean? So let us unpack. So say, as I was saying in the beginning, say a bird has two birds to follow, the neighbors. So now how many elementary percepts it may have? It has four elementary percepts, 2 to the power 2. So how they are made? Now a bird may decide to follow both the birds. The bird may decide to follow neither of the birds, and the bird may decide to follow either of the birds. So that's the four combination that is possible, and I say that exhausts the elementary possibilities associated with the binary decision making here in the case of two birds. So once I describe the decision state of the mental state of the bird in terms of this superposition or quantum formalism, so now how do I really connect to the physical realm? So I need something that that maps me to the physical realm. So here comes the idea of perception. How did the bird come to know about the elementary percepts? It's obvious, because of the perception. Here in the case, you can take visual perception by seeing around. Now I want to describe the perception. So since I am working in the realm of quantum formalism, so let me describe an operator for perception that encodes the perceptual decision making process of the bird. So once I do that successfully, so now how do I connect the perception, the mental state and the physical world? I need one action. So the framework is like this. So I have the world out there, the physical world which I want to describe, and I have the mental realm, the conscious observer, if you want to say. Here of course I'm not talking about the pure consciousness at the level of mind, the decision making process or intellect. So at this level I had the input from the world as perception, and if I want to act back, I mean the bird wants to act back, so that's the action. So this action perception mechanism with associated meanings is the whole process of creation of the reality in this case. So what does that mean? So it means that so action and perception, you may describe the action and perception without inferring any meaning out of it. That's not the Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy always carries the semantic aspects to it. That's why the idea of experience is always built into every fabric of its ontology. So here, how did we encode the meaning? Here, the decision states are the states of the meaning. So the elementary percepts that I described, that either to follow both birds, not to follow any of them, or to follow either of them. So that encodes the framework of meaning. So once I have this aspect done, so I describe the physical process as the ensemble average of my perception operator. So, and in our recent work, so we could successfully demonstrate that the physical movement of the birds, the flocking, the wonderful patterns that we see in the sky, it can emerge from the operations of the mental realm. So this work is recently published in a Royal Society Proceedings A journal. So this is just one very small example how we can connect the mental realm to physical realm. So the take-home message from this, one of the take-home philosophical message, if I want to derive from it, is that the physicality emerges from the mental operations, the mental realm. So now, of course, that's just a suggestion, and if I want to study it more systematically, so I need to describe the fundamental realm, the ontological realm properly, so that this action perception mechanism is glued with the meaning. It describes the world out there. So to understand that, let us unpack it further. So what is the external world? What is my mental realm, or the realm of experience, or subjective aspects? What is that? So that requires further understanding. So first of all, we proposed a framework which is consciousness first, consciousness-centric. That means everything that exists is conscious. Also our Upanishadic aphorisms describe that. So everything is conscious. So the notion of matter emerges because of our process of perception. So the world that I experience is not the same the world an ant experiences. Certainly it is different. So that's why the physicality that I can conjure through my process of perception, that is certainly different from that of the ant or any other species having a different mechanism of perception. So the perception is and the action when we act back on the world, that is very much connected. It's a you can say the perception and action, they are reciprocal processes in a sense. So the world that we perceive around us, the physical world, is actually constructed through the experience that we have, sensory faculties. That doesn't mean that the world out there is false or it's an illusion. It need not be. So just like we have in the Sankhya system where we consider hierarchy of ontologies, so one nested upon the other. So here the ontological frameworks are also nested or stratified, if you like to say. So let us consider the reality as just the conscious units representing maybe, if you like, the units that are responsible for subjective awareness, feeling, or philosophical text, theological text, it's the Atman. The world you can think of as the collection of individual conscious units, and it's actually the relation that is shared among the conscious units. That's the world, or if you like to say, the Prakriti. Now, all of these different conscious units, they're interrelated, the network that you can describe as the world. So they exist, they interact because there has to be a conscious unit of the same nature as the conscious unit. There has to be, when consciousness, something is a substrate consciousness that kind of unifies the whole of conscious units interaction, the relations. So that we say the conscious whole, the mutual interactions through the sensory apparatus, it gives rise to the meaning that we generate within our conscious Danta Karana, what we say. So in this framework, so the conscious units their mutual interaction, or if you like to say, that's a kind of a semantic field. So in that semantic field we have further subunits that emerges. That's the realm of ego, realm of mind, realm of rational faculty, then the senses that actually interact out. So like that, so the whole framework, we can understand that the physical world is actually emerges within our conscious awareness. So the notion of physicality that I see, physicality means I can measure something, I can quantify something, I can touch something. So that's accessible through our senses. That's the notion of physicality, I mean. So that arises because of our sensory perception, and that the sensory perception is very much glued with our action, or the way we interact out. So that is how the world is not really independent of our conscious experience, although the world exists as a real thing, the Prakriti is real, but they're all very interlinked. In the language of quantum mechanics, it may be too early to say that, or maybe overstretch of that. It's some kind of entanglement. Entanglement means when things are inseparable. Say two quantum particles, they're inseparable, their descriptions are inseparable, that means they're entangled. Means I cannot describe the quantum state of one independent of other. So that's the idea of entanglement. Similarly, the world out there cannot be described independently of the conscious observer. So that's the idea. So they both are interlinked through the mechanism of action and perception cycles, through which the meaning that we understand in this world, the cognition, it's a product of that. So what I wanted to mention is that the physicality is not really an objective reality. What we usually consider in modern framework of science, the reductionist approach. So the objectivity is actually appears because of the shared context that we all have. Suppose I want to interact with an ant, the ant may not understand my sensory responses unless there is something in common. I may say something, not necessarily the species has those kind of apparatus, suitable apparatus to process the way I process. So they have their own mechanisms to interpret the interaction of the world. So the physicality that I mentioned, the objective world. So objective world is actually it's not so correct. So it has to be described in relation with the conscious observer, and the conscious units, they are described in relation with the supreme conscious whole, or the full stratum, the full fabric of interaction. So that's the backdrop, the model that we are trying to develop using advanced mathematical frameworks such as category theory and others. So the idea is, so we want to create a narrative where we not necessarily adhere to a reductionist approach to explain the world out there. So in this framework, so the world out there appears as an emergent effect, rather than considering the mind and intellect or the senses operation of that as emergent effects. So let us start from the top level and reduce to the level of matter, the physical matter that we know. Anyway, the models of science are considered the realities, so in an objective way, but that model keeps changing. So the physical models of the world are promoted as kind of ontological realities in our reductionist empirical theories. If that is possible, so why not we start from a framework where we discuss about the operations in the higher order realm, or the realm of mind or intellect, and derive the physical aspects from it. So that is very much possible, and we are trying to do that. So in this attempt, we have another work that recently got accepted in another international journal called +1. So there we studied a very interesting case. So that is connecting the sense of doership, my sense of false ego, to the perception of time. So in the cognitive neuroscience, so the sense of agency is a very important concept. Sense of agency means how much I feel myself to be the doer of the activities that I do in this world. It has been shown that the sense of agency is very much linked with the sense of the experience of the time. So we explored that, and it has been explored in the past also in many other works in the West. So what we wanted to see is how meditation transforms one's notion of self and notion of agency, and how it is connected with the perception of time. So what we did, we considered three groups of human subjects. So the first group, they contemplated on selfless aspects of life, that how I can selflessly contribute to society, to the others. One contemplated selflessly for some time. The other group contemplated selfish actions, that how I am the center of all activities, and how I look, how I perceive the world, how I-ness, or myself is the center of all the things that I do. So when we made the subjects contemplate on that, and the third one, control group, doing nothing. So and then followed by this task, we asked them to perform the task to perceive time. So that's the framework given by Patrick Haggard. So it's called intentional time binding. So we wanted to study that. So that actually gives the judgment error in perception of time. So in that framework, what we saw is those human subjects, those subjects contemplating selflessly, so they had reduced sense of agency, as seen through lessening of judgment error in perception of time. And those subjects who contemplated on their selfish actions, for them we saw the judgment error in the perception of time is more compared to control group. So this is an interesting study, it just recently got published, accepted, so it's about to be published. So in this work we attempted to connect the sense of agency, how we act on the world, and how it is connected with the perception of time. So like that, several works that we have been doing, and the purpose of all these works is to very systematically, in an empiric scientific framework, how can we study matter in a different way. So the goal is to understand the physicality as an emergent effect of the realm of consciousness or mind, and so that a new causal framework, new way of thinking could be put forth, so that the issues like mind-body problem may not surface, the issues like a hard problem of consciousness may not arise. So the application of all these studies is enormous. So for example, in a recent collaboration where we are studying the cases of reincarnation, and we studied some subjects who could recall their past lives, or we also studied the subjects who, even though blindfolded, they may recognize the objects outside. So we verified that that's a true case. We studied that very extensively. So in all these frameworks, they do not have any empiric, rather reductionist framework doesn't really answer to these puzzles. So there are several other issues that we may list surrounding how the need of a top-down framework is extremely important, and how much it is needed. That is very much there. So the bottom-up approach, where we construct the higher realms as epiphenomenon, so that is not really going to help us understand how our higher order experiences, feelings, or even morality, sense of responsibility, how does that emerge? All of this, how do they emerge? So we cannot answer them properly. Instead, if you start from a consciousness-centric framework, where the fundamental building blocks are conscious units, and then derive matter as a derivative from it, so probably you would be in a better position to do a better science, and to contribute to the holistic well-being of the society, the issues of mental health and related issues could be addressed very nicely, because we are addressing the root of the problem, the self, which is the perceiver, rather than the inert matter that doesn't perceive and doesn't have any awareness or any consciousness. So instead of solving the problem where it doesn't exist, we should start right at the beginning, where we create the framework where there is scope for all of this. So in the way reductionist framework of modern science has evolved, as I mentioned at the beginning, we completely took out all the subjective aspects, the notion of self, experience, all such things are taken out. So now, if we want to include all of this, we need to rewrite the whole narrative and create a framework where consciousness is fundamental. Rather than considering consciousness as a derivative, we need to consider consciousness as fundamental. Then only there can be a new revolution that can take place. And our Indic philosophy, I strongly feel that it's certainly going to help us formulate such a epistemic and ontological framework, solve the difficult problems we have in our society. So instead of seeing different aspects of knowledge as different disjoint pieces, we will see everything in a holistic framework. So that would be certainly helpful for the whole of humanity. So the science which has become for some reason quite destructive because of the misuse. So probably when such aspects are included, we may have a better world to live in. So that's the thing I wanted to mention. So thank you.